The witness of community. In Acts chapter 2, we read about the life and ministry of the local church. Starting in verse 42, it says, verse 41, it says, "So those who received his word were baptized, and there were added that day 3,000 souls. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and the fellowship, to the breaking of bread and prayers. And awe came among every soul, and many wonders and signs were being done through the apostles. And all who believed were together and had all things in common, and they were selling their possessions and belongings and distributing the proceeds to all as many as had need. And day by day, attending the temple together and breaking bread in their homes, they received their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having favor with all the people. And the Lord added to the number day by day those who were being saved." We often, when we read that text, we pay attention to the more religious aspects in that text in the life of the early church. We pay attention to the fact that they were in the apostles' doctrine. That's great. We need to study the Word of God. We need to preach the Word of God. We need to teach the Word of God. We focus on the fact that they were praying together. Prayer is very important. Where there's no prayer, there's no passion, and there's no power. So the Word, prayer, yes, those were wonderful things. They were breaking bread in their homes, which probably includes more than just eating together, but includes the Lord's Supper. And they were remembering what Jesus had done for them. And we focus on the fact that they were worshiping together in the temple courts, etc. The religious aspects, and that was just great. But if we're not careful, we can miss the relational aspects in that text. You see, these people were getting together for fellowship. They were spending time with each other. They were encouraging each other. They were stimulating each other to move forward. In Hebrews chapter 10, it describes what that kind of fellowship is really about. It says there that we should not give up meeting together, as is the habit of some, but we should do this even more and more as we see the day approaching, and we should consider one another how we can spur one another on to love and good deeds. That's fellowship. When we get together, and it serves as kind of a spiritual fill-up, as a recharging, and we are better equipped to live the Christian life after we've been together than we were before. And that was happening. And some of those, like Barnabas, who had possessions, they were selling them to help out the poor. And there are so many wonderful phrases in there. You see, those people, they were worshiping and they were receiving their food with glad and generous hearts. Man, this would have been a great group to be around. I can see how people looking at them would go, I want to be a part of that group, because they're exciting and they love each other and they really have a positive outlook on life. And so it's no accident that in verse 47 it says they were praising God, but they also had favor with the people. Now, not everybody's going to love us. Jesus warned us that, and Paul warned us that we're going to encounter persecution. That's normal. But at this early stage, I think it's not accidental that they had favor with the people, because the people looked at them and said, man, that's a different group. I really like what's going on. And as a result, the Lord was adding to the church daily. You see, we often think about witness resulting in community. We think about how do we share the gospel in such a way that people come together in groups and then form churches and then stay together in churches and fulfill the functions of the church, etc. But we forget about the witness of community. When we started planting a church in Kiev, Ukraine, we were planting among internally displaced people that had fled the war out in the east, promoted by Russian-backed separatists. And those people had left everything. They'd lost houses, they'd lost cars. But the hardest thing for them, particularly as Ukrainians, is they had lost their community. The people they'd grown up with, the people they would see at the store, the people that they would sit on park benches and talk with, they lost their collective, they lost their community. And that was very hard for Ukrainians, because Ukrainians understand who they are in connection with a group of people. They are less individualistic than Americans by far. And so, as we began to talk with people, it was interesting. This one lady came up and said, we live on the 17th floor. We don't know our neighbors don't want to know us. But when we come here to your group, we feel again like people, and even important people. And one young lady, daughter of a grandmother who'd been attending, called our pastor. She didn't want to hear our gospel. She didn't want to be around us, but her mother had started attending, and she called and said, "You need to come get Grandma. You need to come get my mom on Sunday." The pastor said, "Why?" She said, "Because when she hangs out with you all are nice and you're kind, and she's a lot easier to live with. But when she doesn't hang out with you all, she is impossible to live with." You see, that's the witness of community. One lady talked about, we started giving out these little packets of food products to help the internally displaced people. And she said this the day of her baptism. She said, "When I first started coming, it was just for the food. I wasn't going to listen to your gospel. I didn't want to get to know you all. But then you all were so friendly and so nice. And I thought, okay, it's okay to be friends with them. But I wasn't going to listen to your gospel. And then after a while, I thought, man, how can I not listen to what they're saying? Because they're so nice and they're so kind." So I started listening, but I was not going to accept your Jesus. And then over time, she said, "But you know, even though I didn't want it to happen, your Jesus, through your love, touched my heart. And he saved me, and now your Jesus is my Jesus." That's the witness of community. Sometimes as churches, we say, "Oh, come in, we want to have you be a part of us." But the world hears us saying, really, come out of your refrigerator and into our deep freeze, into our freezer. And until the world sees people relating to each other differently and loving each other and supporting each other like the early church did, we shouldn't be surprised if they turn a deaf ear to our gospel. You see, our gospel is really an ideology. It's a worldview from their perspective. And deep in the heart of man, there's the idea, I'm not going to believe your ideology until you show me that it forms a group better than the community, than the group that I'm located in right now. That's the witness of community. And we need to do those religious things like they did. We need to be in the Word. We need to pray. We need to have the Lord's Supper. We need to worship. But we need to make sure that our churches are loving, caring communities that people can look at and say, you know, I'd like to be a part of that. I'd like to hear what they have to say. That's the witness of community.